All right, welcome everyone to Tikva Through Text. I'm so happy to see everybody today. I'm Rabbi Leah Berkowitz. So I want to welcome everybody, and I want us to start with our blessing. And I'm going to just put it on the screen in case we need that. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot and commands us to engage with the words of Torah. Okay, so as we get started, I'm going to put our text sheet in the chat. I thought I had done that already. I'm also going to put it on the screen, but I know some people like to follow along in their own pace. And our topic for today is what will you create with what I have given you? And so I wanted to ask, and this is something that we can put in the chat, or if it's easier for you, you can unmute. What is something that you have created recently from raw materials? So it could be a meal or an art project, something in the garden, something around the house, that kind of thing. So what is something you've created recently from raw materials? You can put that in the chat, or if it's difficult for you to type, you can unmute and share. We have a junk journal with collages reflecting moments of my life. Meals. Yes, we probably spend a lot of our time creating meals, and we don't give ourselves a lot of credit for what an act of creativity that is. Ideas of mine put to paper, and meals as well. Driftwood birdhouses. Cooking for myself. Oh, first baby food for my grandson, Mazel Tov. Planting flowers. Started a fish stew before coming on. Well, I know you're in the neighborhood. I'm coming over for lunch. All right. Do we have any other creations that we've made from raw materials? Okay, so this text that we're going to look at today comes from a source that I've only recently been introduced to by my teacher, Rabbi Adina Allen, and it comes from Tana Debei Eliyahu Zuta, which is we think a 10th century text, though there was definitely some debate as to when and where it was compiled. And we're going to take a look at. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm trying to reformat the translation so that we can see Hebrew at the same time. I'm not currently able to do that. So again, if you would like to look at the Hebrew at your own pace, it's right on that sheet.
Rabbi, I have it up here.
Yes.
You say you can't get it now?
I'm sorry?
Oh, you did get it.
Yes. So I am sharing it. I can't share the Hebrew and the English at the same time. So if you're somebody who likes to follow along with the Hebrew, you can look at the there. Oh, and we have another edition, adult coloring book, and a picture of a Persian adult coloring book picture of a Persian rug. So we've recently celebrated the holiday of Shavuot, and where we celebrate the revelation of Torah. And for the rabbis, that always brought up the question of exactly how much was revealed at Sinai. And so there was always this question of whether it was only the written Torah, what we would see in the scroll or in the 5 books of Moses, or whether it included also the oral tradition, which would later become the Talmud and the Midrash. And this text starts out in that way, having that conversation about written Torah versus oral Torah. But it ends up going in a different direction. It has something called a mashal lemelech, which is a very popular midrashic device. And a Mishal Melech means a parable of a king. And it talks about, it's a device the rabbis used that actually usually makes the story more complicated than it already was. But when they're trying to explain something, they try to compare it to compare what God is doing to what a human king might do. So we're going to take a look at Tana de Be'aliyahu. One time I was walking on the way. A man found me and went with me on the way of mitzvot. He had Mikra, written law, but no Mishnah, oral law. He said to me, Rabbi, Mikra was given to us from Mount Sinai. And I said to him, my son, Mikra and Mishnah were both of them said from the mouth of God. And what is the difference between Mikra and Mishnah? Rather, he told him a parable, and this is where we get our Mishal Lemelech. To what is this matter similar? To a human king who had two servants, and he loved them with a great love. The servants in this case are usually us. And to one he gave a kab, a measure of wheat, and to the other a kab of wheat. And he also gave to each one a bundle of flax. The wise one of them took the flax and wove a beautiful cloth, and took the wheat and made it into fine flour, and sifted it, and ground it, and kneaded it, and baked it, and set it on the table, and spread the beautiful cloth over it, and left it there until the king should come. And the fool of them did nothing. After some time, the king came into his house and said to them, to his two servants, my sons, bring to me what I gave you. One of them brought out the bread of fine flour on the table with the beautiful cloth spread over it. And the other of them brought out the wheat in a pile and the bundle of flax upon it. Woe for that shame! Woe for that disgrace! Which one is more favored? You must admit it is the one who brought out the bread on the table with the beautiful cloth spread over it. Rather, when the Holy One, blessed be God, gave the Torah to Israel, it was only given to them as wheat from which to bring forth fine flour, and as flax from which to weave a garment. So let's start with some basic questions. What do we notice? What do we wonder? What surprises us? Let's also see if we have any clarifying questions, if there's something we don't understand. Actually, let's start with that. Do we have clarifying questions about the text?
One question I have is just, was it tradition for the king to refer to his servants as his sons? Were they his sons?
Yes, well, a lot of times in these parables, I don't know the custom of the day, but a lot of times in these parables, because the servants are representing us as Israel, us as Jews, we are treated with a lot of affection. So a lot of times it's the favored servant, and a lot of times in the parable, the king has a servant who is like a son to him. It could also be, we could also read it as patronizing, but that's a different lens.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
I'm struggling with, I know that it's a parable, and I know that we've had other stories like this. Nevertheless, if the king says, bring me what I gave you, then what we're considering the ignorant servant is indeed presenting what was given to him. It's as if he saw it as something he need to keep safe for the king, rather than something that he should transform into something greater. And so I hate the idea that we're calling the one who kept it as is ignorant or stupid or, lazy. He was doing what he believed was the right thing to do under the circumstance.
Yes, I'm really glad you said that. I did want to make sure we hit that note. Bob, is your comment related, or because I wanted to just say something in response? All right, Bob.
Yes, it's in response to that. I've always had a problem with the bracha for bread, who brings forth bread from the earth. Well, after all, it's actually the wheat that is brought forth from the earth. All the rest of the work involved in making the bread is something that humans do to improve upon, well, I think, to improve upon the wheat. And it's a joint venture. And I think that's part of what this is about.
Yes, the idea of joint venture. So yes, I think that is the point of the text. And I want to acknowledge what Sarah is saying, because that actually came up in my, the first time that I studied this text. I was in a room full of artists. And in addition to just this person might have, so we did think it was harsh. We did want to show more compassion to this person, because what are some reasons that he might not have made anything from the flour? So Sarah is saying, you know, he felt that the instructions were to keep it safe, and he did that. So we have sort of either the misunderstanding of the instructions, which I don't think they were clear enough for him to even say he misunderstood them, but also the idea that he took it very literally. He said, you said keep it, I kept it. So I also agree that it's a little harsh to call him a fool. Even though we're trying to, the illustration is trying to teach us that another way is better. But similar to, you know, the 4 children at Passover, we now recognize that rather than one of them being good, or each of them being good or bad, that it's just that there are different kinds of people. So what are some other reasons that the second servant might not have made anything with what he had? So first we have that he perceived that the instructions were just to keep it safe. So he's just following directions. Are there other reasons?
Skilled.
Hmm?
He was not skilled in those
Right.
other avenues. He did not know how to create flour. He did not know how to weave cloth. So
Yeah.
And he did not ask other people for help doing that.
Okay. So yeah, he did not have the skills, resources, connections. I saw Bill had unmuted, and then Pat.
Yes, so for me, Rabbi, it raises the notion of positive intent. So both sons, my assumption is, had positive intent and brought forward, and the earlier comment resonated with me too, is that the person who potentially did not have the skill, he or she still came forward with positive intent. But he was judged by the king because he brought something that the king thought was inferior.
Yeah, this text is different if we read it with assuming positive intent.
Right.
Clearly, the author of this text does not see each of these people through the same.
Correct.
There's a clear judgment here. There's the wise one and the fool. Whereas we could take those words out and read this completely differently. Yes, Pat.
I think when someone takes it upon themselves to take a raw product and do something with it, it might be something that the king likes, or it might not be something that the king likes. And more metaphorically speaking, when people start interpreting, at what point do things go off the rails too far from the original intent?
Yeah, so it's a risk to create, because then you didn't do what the second servant did. You didn't protect the material. You took a risk with it. And that could also be dangerous if you did the wrong thing. And again, the instructions weren't clear, and this is the king. Either of them, if they do the wrong thing, there could be very negative consequences. Okay, Bob, and then Cheryl.
Yeah, I was thinking I'm going to kind of jump away from the servants and just go to the place of, like, isn't this exactly what Torah wants us to do? It always gives us enough room for us to have a debate, for us to figure out different ways of understanding it. It's almost like the parable itself becomes a parable. Torah. Anyway, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, we actually spun even more fabric out of this 10th century text than was already there. Yes. Cheryl.
So my husband and I were watching a TV show last night, and one of the things that took place was this gal is looking for a place to live, and a friend lets her move in, and she goes about, in gratitude, she decides to clean up the place, and she rearranges his stuff, and then she decides she's going to cook him a dinner. So she, looks in his fridge and finds things in the fridge and cooks for him. And my husband and I were talking about how presumptuous of her to think that he wants his stuff cleaned up, that he and to rearrange his stuff in ways that she wants, but not necessarily how he wants it.
Yeah.
And to use his stuff to cook something that she wants to cook, but not necessarily something he would want.
Yeah,
And
that is presumptuous is a good word. So again, we're dealing with a lot of assumptions. Whether or not we assume positive intent, whether or not we assume what the instructions are, we had to make some assumptions. I'm curious, how did the person whose house it was react to the favor, let's say?
he was not totally pleased.
Okay.
He said, well, I'm going out for dinner, don't you?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it wasn't yeah.
She said,
I don't want to dwell too much on the television show, but I was just curious whether that was the reaction. So I want to keep us moving a little bit since this is always a very short session. So what is this story supposed to be not supposed to, what is this story trying to tell us about the relationship between the Torah and its interpretations? What does it tell us about what role human beings play in the interpretation of Torah? So I think we already had one comment about this being about partnership. Yes, Pat.
As we read this, I thought I knew what the answer or the correct answer was going to be at the end, and I was pleasantly surprised that it went in a direction that I didn't think it was going to go. What I thought the right answer was going to be was, yes, all was revealed, not just the exact Torah, but everything interpretation was revealed, or at least present at Sinai. And that, brings the question, what is the point of all the people who struggled with this in the future? Is it all preordained? And I'm glad it didn't go in that direction.
So what direction did you see it going in instead? Because it definitely is part of the family of texts that makes that point, but it makes it in a very different way.
Well, like I said, I'm glad it did. It gave people, in this case, the king's servants, some agency or some, ability to do something or preserve it. One decided that it should be preserved, the other decided to do something with it. So it gave them, some purpose other than being vessels of what's already preordained. So
yeah. Okay, thank you. Bob.
I like the idea that the Torah is written in letters of black fire on letters of white fire. And so the written Torah is what we see in the black, and all of the oral Torah is there in the white. And it's just our obligation to read between the lines.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a cool thing to bring up, because I tried to do this yesterday. I wasn't able to do it. I was just at a conference on creativity where one of the activities was to write things on a piece of white paper with white crayon. So you couldn't see it. And then you can actually make sort of like, when I was little, there were like sort of these invisible ink kind of coloring books kind of thing where you could paint on them and it would reveal a message, and then you can paint on them with watercolors and the white will be revealed. So in the context of that, it's really cool to think about the black fire and white fire, because it means that it is possible to see the white fire if you have the right materials, or if you are able to go in a different direction. So I think that's a really cool thing to bring in here, the black fire and the white fire. I'm curious as to whether, off the top of your heads, and especially those people who have been studying either with me or with La Sok for a while, what is an example of an interpretation of Torah that has made your own understanding richer? So something that's the bread made from the flour or the garment made from the flax that gave you a better understanding.
There's so much, I can't come up with anything to put into words.
Yeah. Can you think of like a characteristic of the texts, the millions of texts that you're thinking about? Okay, Pat.
Okay, having come from a fundamentalist kind of Christian background, and knowing the history of the Jewish sects around the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, just in general, any kind of interpretation where you don't take things too literally, but find something useful and humane by doing some interpreting is a good thing. So I don't have a specific example. Well, yeah, I mean, like the part where you stone your disobedient children. Yeah, let's interpret that out of existence. Yes, and so the Pharisees are the ones, and their thought are the ones who survived, and and Hillel won over Shammai, and all that is a good thing. So
wonderful, thank you. Bruce.
Yeah, my memory is a little sketchy on this, but one of the lessons I recall making an impact was when we studied Tikkun Olam. And the rabbi who was teaching us was very clear on explaining that Tikkun Olam, as we understand it, I guess ordinarily, is an act of charity. But his presentation really helped me understand that, in fact, it's much greater than an act of charity. It really is a kind of system of obtaining justice for a society. It was really quite beautiful lesson.
Yes, and in fact, so much of, and I think I've taught this class before in La Sok as well, so much of what we know about our laws for caring for the poor are drawn from a very long argument about what the one phrase in the Torah means, which is you shall provide for your fellow whatever he needs. Well, what does that even mean? What is whatever he needs? And then they go into a very long conversation about that. And that conversation should still be continuing, because we still should be talking about what are necessities and what are luxuries. And it's going to be different moment to moment. Sarah. And then after Sarah, I'd love to hear, if anybody hasn't spoken yet, I'd love for you to jump in on either those first two questions or the last question that I'll share with you.
I'm just thinking about how I see Aaron and the golden calf, and hearing other interpretations have really helped me see that act in a different light than it's often interpreted. So for me, that's the one that in this moment, there's so many, but that's the one that stands out, that has really shifted my thinking about Aaron and that incident.
Yes, because that can also be read through a lens of compassion. That's a little radical now, but yes. I just want to throw the last question out there, and then I see Mark, Susan, and Yvonne. So what is something that was, and this might be just a taking with you question, what is something that was given to you out of which you created something better or at least different? which could be a physical object, a teaching, or a life experience. So let's start with Mark.
Well, one of my favorite Midrash stories is of Hillel and Shammai arguing over a certain point of law and trying to call on the heavens to indicate which one of them is right. And even when the Bat Kol, the voice of God, or voice of heaven, comes down in favor of one of them, the other responds, we're not paying attention to that because, the Torah is for us to interpret. The Torah is for us here on earth. And then the voice from heaven says, my children have defeated me.
Yes. Yes.
That's like the trap door of Torah, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, that's a wonderful text. It's actually some later rabbis. I think it's Rabbi Joshua and Rabbi Eliezer. And at one point, the walls cave in to say that the minority opinion is correct, and somebody from the majority points at the walls and goes, "This does not concern you. Stay out of it." Yes. So Susan, and then Yvonne.
Well, as Rabbi Streifer knows, Korach is my favorite Torah portion because it's my bat mitzvah portion. And one of the things that I learned a few years ago is the Midrash about an argument made in heaven and an argument not for the sake of heaven. In the description of Korach's argument against Moses being not an argument made in heaven. And it makes me think about being very careful with my words and how I disagree.
Okay, so yes, that interpretation encourages you to think about whether it's a machloket l'shem shamayim, whether it's an argument for the sake of heaven. Yes, Yvonne.
Thank you. Looking at the first question, what does this story tell us about the relationship? I think it's a very modern message that it's giving, because it's telling us, the way I see it, I interpret it, is that we have to have individuality when we read the Torah, not follow the straight teachings as we see them. But on the other hand, there's a lot of different facets in our Judaism of people that follow more towards the mitzvot, let's say, and others that interpret it in a different way. So it's giving like an okay to be individualistic in when we are interpreting the Torah itself. So much that it's telling that the other way is not acceptable, that we have to take the Torah and make it our own. Make it our own and interpret it and take it as individuals that we are. The examples of interpretation of Torah, I can think of commandments, some commandments, even when we study a commandment in depth, like honor your parents, it's just not what does honor mean, and we go into the different interpretations and cases, etc. The giving the 10th of the land, that was, the physical, the actual putting and leaving it for the poor. How do we take that and interpret it now to modern times? So there's so many, like everyone else said.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So I want to, so this idea, I like with what Yvonne says, because that, I think when this text was written, I think they were talking about that the bread and the flats, the bread and the fabric are, the mainstream interpretations of Torah. But we could also, if reading this today, say there could be many different recipes for that bread, and there could be many different there could be many different patterns for the cloth. It doesn't have to necessarily be just the one. And even within what is now mainstream Judaism, there are many different interpretations and recipes for these texts. So this last question, I'm basically going to give you as a reflection question for going on about the rest of your day. I want you to think about something that was given to you out of which you created something better, or at least different, And that could be a physical object, a teaching, or a life experience. Because a lot of times we receive things and we're not sure exactly what to do with them in the moment, but we are eventually able to create something out of them. And I also just wanted to share with you, so I first encountered this text at an art retreat, and let me know if you can see this. This was my interpretation of the text. I actually had to look up how to draw what a wheat stalk looked like and what a flax looks like in its original. And it actually has these little purple flowers on it. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Cool.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us for Tikva Through Text. And again, Rabbi Streifer sends his regrets. He'll be back for the next program. And have a wonderful week. And we're getting close enough that I can say Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Thank you very much.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Shalom.
Very
Thank
good.
you.